speak out in defence of the children of the poor.
I look at my kids daily and think, if you wasn't here, I wouldn't be here.
What happened the first time?
I slept with him.
How old was you?
I was 11, Tom.
He had sex with you when he was 11, so he raped you.
An independent inquiry into the sexual exploitation of children in Telford and Wrekin has been going on for well over 2 years. The police, social services and counsellors are refusing to help the inquiry at all.
We are supplying them with 40 years worth of information.
40 years?
40 years worth of information.
For 40 years children have been failed.
So that the inquiry can
For 40 years children have been failed.
Full understanding.
A deliberate attempt to cover up these crimes against little girls for fear of being called racist. They've known what has been going on in that town for 40 years.
They would talk to me about going to meet certain people, not to tell my dad if they told me to go to that person.
Who was the kingpin? Who was the main organiser?
I don't want to be living this for the rest of my life.
He was that hurt by it. He got out of the car and he couldn't wait for the police to come. He needed to go.
Family trees, networks, how they operate, who operates with who. Just so you understand, as we go along here, we have CPS solicitors, police officers, politicians. That's the level of connections who are involved and intertwined within these gangs. There are 5 dead females at the hands of these gangs in Telford alone.
I'm sorry for doing this. I mean, I have to be 100% before I make it.
This is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me today, and this story is about Tommy Robinson and his new documentary about grooming gangs in the Telford area. A lot of people have been sending me messages. To be honest, for a few months I've had a lot of comments here and there about why have you not covered grooming gangs on Rochdale or another example, and the very simple reason is I wasn't doing the news, so I wouldn't have been able to cover it. But with the recent developments in relation to Tommy Robinson, this has made it an appropriate time for me to be able to discuss this situation and explain the backstory and other elements to it as well, and then that can leave you to make up your own mind on what you think. The most dangerous thing we have nowadays is feeding a narrative, just one side of everything. So I'm going to try to include every aspect from all sides of this story. Tommy Robinson has claimed that his car was blown up after he released the promo trailer for a new documentary called The RAPE of Britain. Due to censorship on YouTube, I'm going to avoid saying that throughout the whole video. Tommy Robinson founded the English Defence League, and I'll talk about that more in a bit. It's believed to be the 3rd time that the campaigner's car has been blown up. His real name is Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, and his car was set alight, and police have stepped up patrols in the area amid growing concerns after the announcement of the new documentary. And this is being covered by West Mercia Police in Telford. In a stream online, Robinson stood outside the Telford police station and said he was the victim of a recent arson attack. He said police remained outside a guarded property that he was linked to in the early hours of the morning. The 39-year-old alleges that he now faces serious threats, and he said that forensic teams are currently examining the vehicle. Robinson said this is just a development. We're at the police station in Telford, and you may have seen news reports that there was another arson attack last night in Telford. The car was blown up, he said, outside of the hotel that he was staying in, and he said he wasn't aware of it at the time, so the car was taken away, and there is some pictures of it. He said he found out later on in the night, and there is several people that he's had to call in to protect the home of somebody that he was associated with. The second vehicle that was attacked was actually filmed, and I posted this on Instagram as well. So some stories that I don't get a chance to post on YouTube straight away will always be available on the other platforms. 2 women said that they came to the area just to see family, and they was attacked by a gang of Asian males that were stood on the street with weapons. The one thing you have to point out in this video is that there was no video footage of any people lurking around the area. There was nobody on any corners. There was no gangs of Asian males. And this is something where there was no evidence provided. I've made requests publicly for anybody that has videos, but there doesn't seem to be anywhere.
I have to come back out because I said, don't you dare stop up here. And they
have to get on me after you.
Mate. Them on the corner, I said, don't stop.
Fucking hell.
Pulled up here as come out and he's just come and smashed the car up.
Asian male, sorry.
Yeah, they were all Asian. All Bali.
All balaclavas?
He's seen me screaming.
Was it balaclavas?
Yeah, directly at gloves and balis. They're not stupid. They are not stupid. But he's seen me screaming at him saying, what the fuck? And they still carried on. He hit me with the bat.
What the fuck are you doing?
He hit me with the bat. They've got half the baseball bat.
So what did they do? How did they pull you over if you was driving?
We come down, pulled up here, because I went, yeah, let me ring me on. He said, ain't coming. Yeah, as we pulled up, they've jumped in front of us, jumped out, bricks, bats, the lot. You name it, they're fucking smashed us.
So there's a white Audi A5, it's drove past us today, pointed at us and drove off. An A3, a white Audi A3, pulled up there, pointed at us and drove away.
This evening or today?
No, this afternoon.
It was parked, Cardiff and Green on the fucking corner. They're all standing there in valleys with bats. And it's just being allowed. I already rang this and said to it's taken nearly 20 minutes for you lot to even turn up. You're walking down the fucking street in front of me.
Yeah.
We heard them all skid it. So when we heard the car skid up, I thought they skidded up for us and that's why we rang 999.
There's the bat, look in the bag. Snap straight over my head. What?
Yeah, hold on a second. We need to bring them to the station.
There's clearly an ongoing issue.
There's a big issue, has this been going on for a while? Do we know around there, or
Pardon?
has it been going on for a while, this kind of stuff?
To be honest, mate, this is my first time around here, so I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, no, definitely.
Civilians are getting civilians are getting attacked. Civilians walking their dog.
Yeah.
So what's been happening in the night?
This is what you get now when you walk into driving to Montgomery, yeah? Yeah. And I'm sitting there screaming, yeah? And they're looking in your eyes as well. Look at this. Yeah, oh, and there's the evidence.
Tommy Robinson has now become a reporter and he believes that he's been targeted ahead of the new documentary that he said is being released in the US later this month.
Because you're not here. Because your police aren't here.
He's helping us, you know, we're not doing nothing.
I'm not going to continue this conversation any longer. I've listened to you for quite a long time. I'm not going to continue any longer. I've told you I'll update the log, and that is what I'm going to do.
And does that mean they're going to ring me? You haven't even asked for my phone number. Are they going to contact the family? Are they going to contact us back? Are we going to get a top? You don't know.
I don't know that. No, I'm going to ask them to review the log. I don't know if they're going to call you back, Tommy. I'll have to ask them to review the log, and that's what I'm going to do now.
Okay, do you know what? We'll move this family into safety because you lot are fucking useless.
Fine then. All right, bye-bye.
You're fucking useless. Can you believe that?
She knew you was going to fucking ring.
I know. Can you believe it? She knew. She was right. She didn't ask questions. She knew everything already.
She knew everything already.
She knew everything already. I can't believe that.
Before this incident, the last time anybody heard from Tommy was when he cornered, filmed and accused a law firm worker at Wrekin Retail Park of grooming a child. The confrontation happened in Telford and is now subject to a police investigation. And of course, if anybody has any evidence of any grooming or girls being manipulated by older people, the right thing to do is definitely to expose it. But the main problem with pedo hunting is what this is, what that example that I've just give is paedophile hunting. And the problem with that is if you reveal somebody's identity before you've got enough evidence to guarantee a conviction, in the court of law, that may actually help them to get away with the crime. So I definitely support any sort of paedophile hunting videos, but I think it's ideal in the future to maybe hide the identity until the criminal prosecution has gone through the court. The latest statement from the police says that there is currently an independent investigation underway regarding the child sexual exploitation in Telford and they await a report. Several people have already been convicted and jailed for their roles in the Telford grooming gang, and they believe there could be over 1,000 victims. In the inquiry that is ongoing at the moment, there is 1.2 million pages of written material, and the majority is from Telford and Wrekin Council. And the leader of the inquiry, Mr. Crofer, says that he's contacted and attempted to contact 212 witnesses, and they have interviewed 131. So of course, following the convictions of several males, which I'll talk about in a moment, they then launched an inquiry. And the problem with the actual investigation too was that there was a ban on any reporting during the Telford investigation, during the court trial. So that means that people felt like this story just disappeared from the media. Several of the men that was jailed in relation to the Telford grooming gang in 2013 were only able to be reported about after a reporting ban was lifted by the judge. They revealed the details of the court case that occurred in the High Court, and the judge upheld a decision that one of the men was not mentally fit to be tried. The man's name was Nashad Hussain, 23 years old, and he was cleared of trafficking a girl aged 14 at a trial last year, but the jury was unable to reach a verdict of engaging in sexual activity with a child. Youth workers were the first to have raised the alarm when teenage girls in Wellington, when girls came to them and told them about the same stories involving the same men. An operation was launched by the police called Chalice, and this revealed details of a network of men who targeted young and vulnerable teenage girls. The subsequent investigation, dubbed Operation Chalice, revealed details of a network of men from the Pakistani community who targeted young and vulnerable teenage girls. After West Mercia Police's investigation into suspected underage sex and child prostitution, 7 men were finally convicted in cases that stretched over 2 years. 4 experienced judges heard the cases from young women who were aged between 13 and 16, and they were abused over a 2-year period from 2007 to 2009. But some of this abuse, they believe, could have been dating back to the late 80s. One of the main perpetrators was Adel Ali, who was 25 years old and known as Eddie. He was given a 26-year extended sentence and an 18-year immediate custodial with an 8-year licence. His 29-year-old brother Mubarak Ali, known as Max, was given 22 years and a 14-year immediate custodial, 8 years on licence. These were for offences in relation to controlling child prostitution, causing child prostitution, and 2 offences of trafficking into the UK for the purpose of prostitution, involving 2 of the victims. And they've both received lifelong sexual prevention orders. Other people that were convicted in the ring were Mohammed Ali Sultan from Victoria Avenue, Wellington, Tanvir Ahmed from Wellington, Mohammed Islam Chowdhury from Sutton Hill, Maruf Khan from Wellington, and Mohammed Yunus from Alston. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Jameson was the senior investigating officer in Operation Chalice, and they said they are pleased with the convictions that they have achieved as a result of the operation. An operation that was among the most complex that West Mercia Police has ever undertaken. The convictions are the result of several years of hard work from an investigating team that at times had more than 50 police officers.
You were arrested, just to remind you, on the suspicion of rape. These are the names of some girls.
There was a few girls, yeah, texting me like, yeah. I wouldn't do nothing with no girls at all. I've got a wife here at home, you know what I mean? I've got a kid on the way and that.
You've texted that person, were you going to suck my sweet chocolate cock?
Laura Johnson, the Director of Children's Services in Telford, said alarm bells started ringing when council staff working with young people realised that some young women were talking about the same men and being taken to the same places. Miss Johnson said it was that result that meant that the police were alerted, and we continued to work very closely with the police during the investigation. So this was discovered by youth workers. And if you actually think about the way that youth workers had so much money taken away from it in the past several years, and this case may have never been discovered if it wasn't for these youth workers. So in relation to the inquiry, of course, there is very little that they're saying openly in public, apart from the amount of paperwork and people that they're interviewing to get the information. This dates back to 2013, and it's taken this long in order to even get the inquiry nearly finished. The results of the inquiry were meant to have been released at the end of last year, but that has failed to happen, mainly due to COVID-19 delays.
We must listen to the victims and survivors of this vile and evil crime and continue to do everything we can to prevent this happening and to do all we can to tackle and charge the perpetrators. Those victims want their voices heard and rightly want answers. We must continue to learn from them to help partners to further improve our practice. Only a government-commissioned inquiry will be able to do this. We're pleased that Professor J has decided to bring the vital work with victims as part of the National Expert Independent Inquiries Truth Project, which begins its work in Telford next month.
And there is a probe into the role of the local taxi industry and also the licensing. The Telford investigation terms of reference were published on Tuesday, and amongst them was a spotlight on whether previous looks at child sexual abuse by the local council came to adequate conclusions. They did not give any specific details as to why the taxis came into focus. The inquiry was announced last year, and police disputed suggestions the number of victims across the 4 decades could be as many as 1,000, and the police believed there was only 100 victims. Some of the victims said that taxi drivers turned up to the schools that they was at and used to give them lifts. So members of this grooming ring, some of them may have had jobs in taxis, and there is evidence in other cases to prove that that was true. Another topic that is going to be covered in the documentary, as we can see from the promotion, is about the deaths in connection to this. Tommy Robinson claims that 5 women died at the hands of these gangs, but there were 3 deaths that are connected to people that were either convicted or connected to the grooming gangs. And one of them was the death of Lucy Lowe, who was 16 years old. She was killed in the year 2000 along with her mother and sister when her home was set on fire by a 26-year-old taxi driver boyfriend who she had had 2 children with. Lucy Lowe was 16 when her abuser Azhar Ali Mahmood set fire to her house and killed her mum Eileen and her sister Sarah. The taxi driver first targeted Lucy in 1997. She was 14 years old when she gave birth to his daughter. And what you have to understand as well is that at the time of her death, she was at home and she'd had a second child as well. So in some way, her family must have known with a man and she was a child. So the primary risk and the responsibility of any child abuse has to start at home, that the parents are doing the utmost they can to protect the children. And also if something does happen, what is being done afterwards. In this case, it would relate to social services and the police as well. What did they do when they discovered this? And from the sounds of things, until she died, not much. Mubarak actually took his daughter out of the home and left her under a tree before he set fire to the house. And he was never convicted of the grooming gang connection, but they believed that he was connected to the gang, and other children said that Mubarak had groomed them. The second victim that was connected was in 2002. Her name was Becky Watson and she was 13. She was killed in an unexplained car accident in the Shropshire town, and despite the crash being recorded at the time as a prank gone wrong, it later emerged that she'd been abused by the grooming gang since the age of 11. In diaries that she'd wrote, she had told of how she'd been forced to sleep around. Her mum told the police that she said her daughter was treated like a criminal, and Becky's friend Vicky Round was abused by the same gang. They got her hooked on crack cocaine at 12 and heroin by 14. Her death at 20 was drug related, and her mother said Vicky would still be here if she hadn't been abused. Some of those were brought to justice, but others were not. Mubarak Ali, 34, and his brother Adel Ali were both jailed for sexually abusing, trafficking and prostituting teens. The paper alleges that young girls were lured from their families to be drugged, beaten and raped in an epidemic that victims have said is ongoing. It is also said that the social workers knew of the abuse in the 1990s and the police took a decade to launch an investigation. The council staff viewed the children as prostitutes, and authorities failed to keep details of abusers because of fears of racism. The Tory MP for Telford, Lucy Allen, demanded a public inquiry and said that the findings were extremely shocking and serious. And in relation to Lucy's story, her daughter, who was taken out of the house by her father and put by the tree before he killed her mother, actually did an interview in a documentary years later in 2019. Her name is Tasneem Lowe, and she was only 16 months old when her father murdered her mother, and she wanted to find out answers about what had happened. Her father was jailed for life, and 19 years on, he is now eligible for parole. Tasmin has been asked to bring her opinion to the parole board, and she's fired up questions about why her father would kill her mother, and goes in search of answers in a 3-part documentary by the BBC called Why Did Dad Kill Mom? And she discovered that her mother may have been groomed and raped by her evil father. She said that her mother found out she was pregnant and she was killed by Azhar when she was only 16 years old. She tries to find out in the documentary why the pregnancy didn't cause any red flags for anybody, and she wonders whether people could have done more. And she goes on to learn that other friends of Lucy were also abused by her father. Investigative journalist Geraldine McKelvey, who had been working on the story for 3 years, released the story on Mother's Day in 2018 March about the grooming scandal that had been covered up and the fact that Lucy was potentially a victim of the gang. The investigation exposed the horrendous abuse that had been occurring and going on for decades, where girls were beaten, raped and sold, and some even killed. Survivors explained how the abuse worked, and groomers were nice to them at first, buying them takeaways or presents before taking them to the Wrekin, which is a beauty spot just on the outskirts of Telford, where they would be raped or taken to people's houses and passed around to friends. The journalist kept hearing one story about a row of 7 or 8 houses, and she said there was a rapist in every house. She also heard how underage girls were taken to rooms that were above takeaways to be assaulted and raped when the perpetrators selling them, and they made thousands of pounds. The daughter of Lucy Lowe had found transcripts from the court about her mother's case, and she said that there was evidence that her father used to check if Lucy had been with anybody else, and he was clearly very possessive and obsessed with her sexual activity. One of Tasnim's mum's friends told her something that shocked her. She said that I used to see your dad, and there was one day I was upset and he drove past and saw me. He groomed me at first, and at first I thought I liked it, and he was someone that actually cared and listened to me, and then one day I ended up sleeping with him. He knew what he was up to. He was manipulating me from day one. He had his friend that he introduced me to, and that's how I got involved in all of it. They would get a litre of vodka or Bacardi and say, let's play spin the bottle. And I was only 15 and steaming drunk, and they'd all be laughing, and then they'd rape me. It was shocking to hear that Dad was an abuser, but Tasnim couldn't understand why her mum's friend never came forward and said anything. She said that she was so terrified of them that she didn't want to come forward. Tasnim's dad was never investigated for any sex crimes, and she returned to the police in the documentary to try to find out any more ideas as to what had occurred. In relation to who Tommy Robinson is, the former English defence leader was found guilty in July 2019 for interfering in the trial at Leeds Crown Court for sexual grooming, and he was live streaming himself from outside the court, and he confronted people before they was convicted of the actual cases. During the 2018 case at Leeds Crown Court, there was reporting restrictions put in place, postponing the publication of any details until the end of the trial. And this is very important because the last thing you want is for a case to get thrown out because they can't get a fair trial. There was 29 defendants, potentially 29 victims. So if these cases had been thrown out, it would have been detrimental to them getting justice. In a written ruling, Dame Victoria Sharp said that Robinson had made the broadcast to denounce the media for their behaviour. The judge found that he encouraged others to harass a defendant by finding him, knocking on his door and watching him. This created a real risk to the course of justice, and there could be serious implications. He was jailed for 13 months on the same day for the Facebook broadcast, but was released 2 months after because he won an appeal. The second time he appeared in court for the same offence, Dame Victoria told Robinson that the time he previously spent in prison would go into account for his contempt of court, and she reduced his sentence to 19 weeks, of which he would serve half before being released. Contempt of court exists so that people can have fair trials. The idea that juries can't be influenced by anything they see outside of the trial or in the courtroom. The rules apply to everyone, from journalists to people posting comments on social media. If someone interferes with a trial, the defendants can walk free and a new trial will have to be called. For somebody that obviously claims to want to get convictions and expose this, the last thing you'd imagine he'd want to do would be to jeopardise that. And with Tommy not being able to post on social media due to being disabled, he's now on a profile called Getter. And on Getter, he posts a lot about anti-COVID rhetoric. He's always requesting money for support for what he's doing as well. And this follows on from March 2021, where he was accused of misusing donations given by supporters. The independent newspaper revealed that the EDL founder and self-styled journalist was listed on the insolvency register under his original name, Stephen Christopher Lennon. So what happened was, former colleagues of Tommy Robinson, specifically Caelan Robinson, came out and disassociated himself to him and said that he'd been spending the money that he'd raised from crowd funds on nefarious activities that included drug taking. The video producer ran an online fundraiser from 2018 and he announced that he was going independent when he received more than £425,000 in 3 months. But when the donations began rolling in, he said that he requested new equipment that did not materialise. Callan told the Metro that I ran the crowdfunder for him from mid-2018 and in 3 months we raised £400,000. He said that we advertised on the website saying 3 things: security, travel and film equipment. As soon as the money started coming through, he got the first 30,000 and said, right, we need a new camera, we need new lights, we need to be able to cover this better quality stuff with the equipment. Callan then said that Tommy was always saying he had to pay back friends because of going on the sesh from the week before, and he would take £2,000 and then said, I've got my wife and it's all personal bullshit. Caelan said around 2% of the £425,000 was eventually spent on equipment and staff costs, but this was not clear what happened to the rest of the money. And there was no checks and balances, and Robinson didn't have any security. He said that Robinson transferred hundreds of thousands of pounds in donations from the business account and would often withdraw large amounts of money. At the same time, he would boast about using prostitutes and said that he'd saw tens of thousands of pounds be spent on nefarious activities. He also says that every time someone donates, you'll see a quote like, I've only got £3.50, but I hope this helps. That is very similar to what I seen literally the other day on his Getter account, where somebody said they only had £5 that they could afford to donate. I don't know why you'd be taking money off somebody who has so little to give. And this also coincides with the fact that in 2019 he was exposed by the Sun newspaper in Italy for being racially abusive to a taxi driver, and he also said that he was the king of the Muslim race, and various other offensive things to do with Palestine.
In this pub, I'm going to record it for you. I've gone to Qatar, pub. I've gone to Doha. It's called Gear of the Sesh while they're all praying. I've gone everywhere, mate. Everywhere. Every city I've gone to. When we went to Germany for the World Cup, I was like, see you later, lads. Where you go? Can I get a taxi? Taxi?
I can't show the video where he speaks about the taxi driver, but I will put that video on the website as well, so you can definitely see the full story is, because that is what it's about. It's about getting the full story, not just one angle or one narrative. It's about the whole story. And in the video as well, he openly talks about drug abuse and taking cocaine all around the world, being able to get it wherever he can. So in actual fact, that video sort of supports what Caelan said about his activities as well. So I think it's really important that everybody gets a fair perspective of what this is really about. There was and is a problem with grooming gangs, and of course they are overrepresented in the Pakistani community. But don't think for a second that means that people of all races are not committing these offences. If you just focus on one race or try to find one answer that suits a narrative, it can only ever cause racial conflict, and that's the last thing that we need in 2022. I don't want to see people fighting each other in the street because of something that was drew up so people can make money and generate from the conflict. I have covered dozens of cases on this channel about grooming gangs involving white people.
Years and ordered to serve a minimum of 25 years. He actually encouraged the rape of children. He used blackmail, so he'd pretend to be young children online, and then when children sent him pictures, he'd blackmail them to get more. He was into voyeurism, and he also made indecent images of children and sold them on a website, which is where this story leads to.
What was it I've done? Oh, what was it I'm supposed to have done? So, the offences that I've arrested you on suspicion of being involved in were blackmail, causing or inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, possessing indecent images of children. Sounds like the rap sheet from hell.
Images of children and the possession of indecent images of children. Do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. anything you do say may be given in evidence.
The predator from Norfolk left some of his victims wanting to take their own lives after he forced them to send him extreme footage.
Professor J did actually take notice of the fact that there was this huge underreporting that was going on of abuse within Pakistani communities. In fact, local women were actually reporting the fact that there were abusers and gangs that were waiting for Pakistani heritage girls outside their schools. She cites the fact that the UK Muslim Women's Network actually has a report on grooming and prostitution of Muslim women.
And also people higher up in society, as I've covered recently with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So don't ever think for a second that these are overlooked for any political correct reasons. This is just about being respectful and also respecting the legal process. After this inquiry is done, I will definitely do a full reaction. And don't forget, you can contact me anytime for any stories in relation to this at news@scarcitystudios.com, and somebody will always get back to you. So really appreciate you joining me today. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Please try and be constructive in the comments and I'll get back to as many people as possible. Please don't forget to follow me online as well at Scarcity Studios on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and TikTok. Peace.